Okay, try to picture this. Ahmedabad, it's Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Just a normal day, you'd think.
Hmm.
But the soundscape is, well, it's different. There's this constant deep rumble, not just traffic.
Yeah, like heavy machinery.
Exactly.
Mm.
Turns out it's 50 earth movers. 50.
Mm.
And then you see the police presence. We're talking almost 2,000 officers.
2,000. That's massive.
And they're all focused on one place, Chandola Lake. It just feels tense, like something big is happening.
Absolutely. That scale, 50 JCBs, all that police, it screams significance. It's not just routine.
Right, it feels deliberate, a show of force almost.
And zeroing in on Chandola Lake specifically tells you there's a target, there's history, there's a reason behind it all.
Precisely. What was actually happening was this huge demolition drive. The Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, the AMC, they carried this out. And what we want to do in this deep dive is really get under the skin of it. Why this scale? What are the layers here that maybe you don't get from just a quick news hit?
And the human side, too. Who's affected?
Exactly, the human impact. We're looking at various news reports, trying to piece together a fuller picture for you.
And it gets complex fast, doesn't it? When you start digging, it's not just about buildings put up without permission.
No, not at all.
You suddenly hear about alleged illegal immigration, the whole backstory of Chandola Lake itself, the politics. It all gets tangled up.
Yeah, those are the threads we're following. The scale, the immigration claims, the lake's history, the political angle.
And some of the details are, frankly, quite surprising. Things that make you rethink your first impression.
Totally. So our goal here is just to walk you through it, make sense of this complex situation in Ahmedabad, clearly, without drowning you in info.
Sounds good. Where should we start? The lake itself.
Yeah, let's start there. Chandola Lake, it's not just, a pond. It's got history.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Deep roots. We're talking Mughal-era origins.
Wow.
And even a link to the independence movement. Gandhi apparently visited during the Dandi March back in 1930.
No kidding. So historically significant. How big was it originally?
It was pretty vast, around 1,200 hectares originally.
Yeah.
But the reality today is quite different.
Because of encroachments.
Massive encroachments over many, many years. Well, it's not exactly a postcard scene now.
Right. Which brings us back to April 29th. Those 50 JCBs showing up. Targeting specific areas, Syasatnagar and Bengal-Vas.
Yeah, those names kept coming up in the reports.
And again, 50 machines. It sounds less like just clearing a site and more like a major intervention.
Well, the scale plus the huge police backup, it just underlines how determined the authorities were. They meant business.
Clearly, this wasn't about knocking down a couple of sheds.
No, this was a coordinated push to take down a lot of structures.
Yeah.
And fast. The deputy municipal commissioner, I think, claimed they'd cleared half of about 2,000 illegal structures by noon that day.
Half by noon. That's incredibly fast. Intense.
It really gives you a sense of the pace they were setting.
And the official line, the reason they gave for this urgency, this scale?
It was tied directly into a wider crackdown on suspected illegal immigrants. Specifically, the focus seemed to be on people believed to be from Bangladesh.
Okay, now this is where it gets really complicated, right? The numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are stark. Before this demolition, there was this big statewide operation.
Right.
And they detained something like 6,500 people, suspected illegal Bangladeshi immigrants, mostly Muslims, reports said, and a lot of them picked up in Ahmedabad and Surat.
Okay, 6,500 detained. That's a huge number. But then
the DGP, the Director General of Police himself, Vikas Sahay, came out and said only about 450 of those were actually confirmed as Bangladeshi nationals.
450 out of 6,500.
Yes, a massive gap.
That's staggering. It immediately raises questions, doesn't it, about who else got swept up in this?
Exactly. And you hear from people on the ground, like Shizad Khan, he's a Congress counselor.
Yeah.
He's arguing that many, many of those detained are actually Indian citizens.
Indian citizens, like who?
Laborers, he says. People from Bihar, Rajasthan, West Bengal, just living in these areas and getting caught in the net. He gave an example one night, 400 people detained. He claims 200 were later let go once they proved they were Indian.
So the police are calling it a mega search operation?
But critics are saying it's casting far too wide a net, potentially affecting Indian citizens unfairly. It really highlights how tough it is to distinguish sometimes.
Yeah, distinguishing between maybe long-term residents in informal housing and actual undocumented immigrants. It's a fine line.
A very fine line. And law enforcement is walking this tightrope. You know, they have a mandate to deal with illegal immigration. That's a legitimate state concern.
Sure.
But the methods, these large-scale sweeps, they can have really profound impacts on entire communities, especially when they're not super precise.
Let's talk about some of the key figures involved. The police commissioner, Gyanendra Singh Malik, he was actually there at the demolition site.
Right. His presence signaled the importance of the operation, and apparently all Ahmedabad police stations were on high alert.
And he made a statement, didn't he? Something about the local minority community actually wanting action against these settlers.
He did reportedly say that. It's a significant claim.
How do we take that?
Consciously, I'd say. Public opinion in any community is rarely uniform, you know. Without more evidence, it's hard to know how widespread that feeling actually was, or if it reflected maybe certain segments more than others.
Fair point. Then there was Joint Commissioner Sharad Singhal from the crime branch.
Yes, he spoke about the AMC survey showing just how extensive the encroachments were.
And he mentioned a previous attempt.
Yeah, back in 2009, they did a demolition drive then too, but apparently the settlers just came back.
Ah, so there's history here.
Yeah.
A pattern.
Exactly. That context is vital. It suggests this isn't new and maybe explains the authorities' feeling of frustration and perhaps why they went so big this time, trying for a more permanent outcome.
And then there's this other character who emerged, Mehmud Pathan, alias Lallu Bihari.
Ah, yes, Lallu Bihari. The reports paint him as quite the operator, like running a kind of one-stop shop for illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
Allegedly providing fake rental agreements, fake Aadhaar cards. There were even rumors of forged passports.
Wow, like an organized system.
It suggests that, yes. And notably, his own property, an illegal farmhouse apparently, was also demolished in this drive. He's reportedly on the run now.
So his presence adds this whole other layer, doesn't it? Suggests organized networks facilitating this.
Absolutely. Which naturally would be a major focus for the police, dismantling not just the settlements, but the alleged infrastructure supporting them.
Let's circle back to the lake itself. We touched on the history, but what about its condition now, ecologically speaking?
Oh, it's pretty grim, ecologically. That historical significance is really overshadowed by the damage it suffered.
How so?
Well, largely because of the encroachments, but also because the lake bed itself has been, well, filled in over time. Satellite images from, say, 1985 to 2024 show this gradual infilling.
Filled in with what?
A lot of it seems to be waste from the huge piranha dump site nearby, basically creating land where water used to be.
So they're dumping waste into the lake bed, creating land, and then people build on it.
That seems to be the pattern described. And to make matters worse, the Narmada pipeline, which was supposed to feed water into the lake, was apparently blocked at some point.
So its water sources are compromised too.
Right. It's left relying mostly on the monsoon, which is becoming less predictable anyway.
It's a real mess. You can see why the AMC would be pushing back hard against construction near water bodies.
Definitely. And these settlements that grew up, like Siasatnagar and Bengal Vaz, the estimate is around 5,000 people living there now.
And it's a mixed people.
Yeah, seems to be. Some reports mention long-term Bengali Muslim residents, people who've been there for years. But there's also this strong suspicion held by authorities that a significant number are Bangladeshi nationals using fake documents. It's a really tangled demographic picture.
Which inevitably leads us to the toughest part, the human cost. What was it like for the people living there, especially after that big raid on April 26th?
Yeah, that pre-dawn raid.
Yeah.
The reports from afterwards are pretty harrowing.
What did they describe?
Locked houses, streets basically deserted, and just this thick atmosphere of fear and anxiety among those who were still there or had come back.
How many people were detained in that specific raid?
The number reported was 890 people.
Yeah.
Including, disturbingly, 214 children, minors, picked up at 3 a.m.
Good grief. That kind of action is bound to cause trauma.
Immense trauma. And yes, reports say about 300 were released later after proving they were Indian citizens.
But the experience...
The experience itself, being rounded up like that in the middle of the night, the impact lingers. There's that story of the man from Madhya Pradesh.
I remember reading that. His kids were terrified.
So scared, he said, that he felt he had to send his whole family back to their village. Just couldn't stay.
Heartbreaking. And others just trying to prove who they are.
Yeah, people desperately gathering documents, asking, what did we do wrong? What was our fault? It's incredibly distressing.
You mentioned activists trying to help.
Yes, people like Mehmud Pathan working to get Indian citizens released, highlighting that there were people from Bihar, UP, Rajasthan caught up in this. It shows the real risk of these broad sweeps.
And then individual stories, like Shukanaban.
Right, she runs a small scrap business, makes about 500 rupees a day. She says she has valid documents.
But she still faces issues.
Constant harassment, she says, just because of where she lives. The area's reputation taints everyone. And she's worried, deeply worried, about her kids' education in that environment.
Her story really shows how that label, illegal settler, can just spread and affect everyone, documented or not.
Absolutely. The stigma becomes a burden for the whole community.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to the politics of this. It seems pretty clear the state government, the BJP, was fully behind this demolition.
Oh, very clearly. The chief minister, Bhupendra Patel, chaired an emergency meeting about it. Top officials were involved. It sends a strong signal.
A signal about being tough on immigration.
That certainly seems to be part of the messaging, yes. Projecting strength, decisiveness on an issue that resonates with parts of their base.
But the opposition, the Congress Party, didn't just stand by?
No, they reacted very quickly. Went straight to the Gujarat High Court.
On what grounds?
Primarily arguing that residents weren't given proper notice before the bulldozers moved in. Lack of due process.
And that move probably stirred things up online.
Oh, yeah. Sparked a lot of debate on social media, places like X, people arguing back and forth about Congress's motives, whether it was the right move, etc.
Standard political fallout, then.
Pretty much. The legal challenge itself raises important questions about procedure and rights, while the online reaction shows how divided opinions are on these things.
And we should probably stress, this Chandola Lake situation, it's not happening in a vacuum in Gujarat, is it?
No, definitely not. There have been other similar incidents, like back in October 2024, remember? Ahmedabad again. Authorities detained 51 Bangladeshi nationals. They were caught using forged documents, Aadhaar cards, PAN cards to try and get welfare benefits. Some were even pretending to be Hindu.
Right, I remember that now. So the issue of forged documents, illegal entry, it's been bubbling up.
It has. And Chandola Lake kind of becomes a microcosm of that challenge. How do you untangle the long-term residents from potentially undocumented immigrants, especially when documents can be faked?
And authorities keep raising the security angle, too.
Yes. There are often official statements expressing concern about infiltrators not just seeking jobs, but potentially having links to anti-national groups. That adds another whole layer of concern.
A very serious layer.
It is. And it's often used to justify stricter actions and surveillance. We also see ongoing deportations numbers were mentioned for February, plans for March 2025. It shows a continued focus, even if the confirmed numbers are lower than initial detentions.
Meanwhile, you have local leaders like Shahzad Khan Pathan asking for something different.
Yeah, he's been pleading for basic services for the legal residents. You know, water, sanitation, maybe permanent housing solutions.
And pointing out the difficulties.
Highlighting how these constant raids, the threat of demolition, it just disrupts life constantly. Plus, the areas themselves often have terrible infrastructure, narrow lanes, poor conditions. It's tough.
It really does point towards needing a more layer approach, doesn't it? Deal with illegal immigration, sure, but also address the conditions and rights of the people who are supposed to be there.
Exactly. Distinguishing between the two and tackling the basic needs of the community, it's complex.
Now, just quickly on the facts and figures, as we sifted through the news reports, there were some slight variations, weren't there? JCB numbers, police counts.
Yeah, you often see that in initial reporting, but cross-referencing the more reliable sources like ANI, the Economic Times, the figures that seem most solid are around 50 JCBs, about 2,000 police personnel.
Right.
And that key number, roughly 450 confirmed Bangladeshi nationals out of the 6,500 initially detained statewide.
So numbers higher than that, especially floating around online, are likely exaggerated.
Seems probable, yeah. Social media tends to inflate things.
And the timing, we're clear, it started Tuesday, April 29th, 2025.
Yes, Tuesday the 29th seems firmly established despite maybe some early confusion.
And that connection or non-connection to the Paheldam terror attack?
Some people definitely speculated about the timing coming so soon after, but local figures like Shahzad Khan denied a direct link.
But the timing still has political resonance, perhaps.
Oh, undoubtedly. A big security-focused operation right after a major terror incident. Politically, that reinforces the government's focus on security, whether it was intentionally timed that way or not.
Okay, so looking forward, what happens now at Chandola Lake? The AMC says they want to restore it.
That's the stated goal, yes. Restore the lake.
But is it that simple? Will the encroachments just return if the root causes aren't dealt with?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unless you tackle the underlying issues, the poverty, the reasons for migration, and importantly, the lack of consistent oversight that allowed settlements to grow history, suggests it could happen again.
And for the people still living there legally?
They face this ongoing challenge, proving who they are, securing their place. It's a precarious position.
It really feels like the authorities are caught in this bind, balancing security needs with humanitarian concerns, with legal due process.
It's a classic difficult balance.
Yeah.
And that high court decision we mentioned, the one about the demolition notice, that could be really significant.
How so?
It could impact whether more demolitions happen and if there's any talk of compensation for people who lost their homes or businesses.
And meanwhile, the hunt for Lallu Bihari continues, trying to break up those alleged document forging networks.
Presumably, yes. Tackling the alleged facilitation is key to preventing future issues on this scale. Ultimately, everyone hopes the lake itself, with all its history, can be saved and protected.
So wrapping this up, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into Chandola Lake?
Well, I think it really throws into sharp relief the sheer complexity of illegal immigration.
Yeah.
It's not black and white,
No.
and it highlights the tension between protecting heritage sites, natural resources, and the very powerful message these large-scale government actions send.
Yeah, it's definitely a statement.
But beneath the policy and the politics, we have to remember the human element. Real people, real families, profoundly affected.
That's crucial. The images of the machines are stark, but the stories on ground are what really stick with you.
Absolutely. It forces you to think about the real consequences of these decisions.
And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Are these massive demolitions actually effective long-term solutions, or do they just, push the problem somewhere else without fixing the core issues?
That's a really critical question to keep asking.
And it makes you ponder bigger things, too, like what does it mean to belong? What defines citizenship, especially in cities that are changing so fast? Food for thought, definitely.
Indeed. And hopefully understanding this specific situation helps us all think more critically about similar events elsewhere, considering all the angles, the security, the human rights, the land use whenever they collide like this.